It's gonna hurt my arm.
Really slowly, like everybody else.
So how's everybody doing today?
Good.
We're going to be getting started in just a moment here with our demonstration. We like to start most any of our demonstrations with an announcement of one sort or another. Something to let everybody else in the vicinity know what's going on in case they want to come and join us. And we have found that one of the more effective ways of announcing a musket demonstration is to begin by firing the musket. This does tend to get people's attention. So that's what I'm going to do, and then we'll talk about it a little bit and fire at a second time to wrap things up. If you don't care for loud noises, you may wish to cover your ears, as this can be a little bit on the loud side. Present your pace! Can fire! Like I said, usually a good way of getting people's attention. But what we have here is what's referred to as a matchlock musket. That's going to be the most common of the military firearms in use in this time period. One of the earliest examples of firearms that are used in any kind of large numbers in the Western world, and rapidly becomes the main weapon for the soldiers here at Jamestown. And I say becomes because it was not initially. On the battlefields of Europe, these folks are applying firearms still in a support role. Most of the serious fighting is still happening hand-to-hand with edged weapons, which is why there's still so much armor in use in the time period. Firearms had by this point replaced archery. Longbows and crossbows were gone. Firearms were still being used similarly to soften the enemy up from a distance before the close combat. As Jamestown's established in 1607, the colonists coming here are expecting to have to fight the Empire of Spain for control of the territory. So they're expecting the same kind of fight against the same kind of foe, and they bring all the same kind of stuff. I have several really close calls with the Spanish, but don't actually end up fighting with them here. And instead, of course, we see the colony go through multiple periods of open conflict with the indigenous population, in this case specifically the Powhatan chieftain. Now, up against the Powhatan, the colonists feel they are in need of some advantages. The Powhatan have several of their own. They've got that home field advantage, right? It's their turf, they know it better. And initially, at least, they've got the numbers advantage. Now that's going to change over time. As soon as the colony gets up and running, the Powhatan's population is going to begin to decline while the colonial population steadily increases. But to start with, at least, Powhatan are going to heavily outnumber the colonial population here. And in addition, you've also got pretty good warriors. We're really good at what they do. The colonists describe the Powhatan repeatedly as exceptional combatants, and in particular, repeated descriptions of them being the world's greatest archers. And then saying something, they're not just saying, man, they're really good with a bow. They repeatedly say they're the best in the world. And it's important to note who is giving the compliment. This is the English, the people who had everyone else in Europe worried for centuries about how good English archers were with the English longbow. The culture that gave us Robin Hood is now worried about how good someone else is with a bow. That should tell you something, right? Alexander Whitaker, one of the gentlemen at Jamestown, writing about the Powhatan archers, says, I suppose the world hath no better marksmen with a bow, for they will shoot the beasts running, the birds flying, and the fish swimming, and shoot with such a marvelous strength that one of ours taken without defensive arms was shot quite through his body, the arrow nailing both his arms to his sides. You think about that, any kind of moving target, they can put an arrow into it. And they can do it with enough power to full-on shish kebab an adult human. Let's see why these guys are worried, why they remain enthusiastic about the use of armor, despite the heat of a Virginia summer, which proves challenging for these Englishmen to manage, and why they felt like they needed some advantages of their own. And they came to rely almost entirely on the firearms they brought with them almost immediately because they felt these gave them some really serious advantages. One of those is going to be its effective range, which is twice that of the Powhatan bow. Now, you can reach out and strike your adversary before he can even get close enough to take a shot. That's going to be useful. Not necessarily for the whole fight, as if they are willing to stick around, they are probably going to be getting closer fast. But it gives you a chance to maybe put a stop to that fight as soon as it's getting started. You've also got a serious stopping power advantage with this weapon. These were specifically engineered for use on the battlefields of Europe against both heavy infantry and cavalry. That means they're meant for shooting through bullet-resistant armor, and they are meant for dropping cavalry horses. So that should give you an idea. I mean, if it'll drop a 1,000-pound animal, what it's going to be capable of doing to a 200-pound. Exponentially higher amounts of energy delivered to the target than any arrow is capable of accomplishing. And while shooting further and hitting harder are undeniably important and useful things, I would argue the biggest advantage here is the weapon's ease of use, which is an important aspect that is not often contemplated as we so often enjoy our pros and cons discussions. But you know, how much of your life do you need to have devoted to its use beforehand to become proficient? You know, Powhatan warriors are not born already the world's greatest. They have to work at it, and they typically start working at it around kindergarten age, around 5 or 6 years old, so that before they're ever old enough to fight, they've had more than a decade to build the skill and the strength necessary to be that good with that powerful a bow. And of course, you have to keep training. You ever get to a point where you're like, yeah, I'm the best, I can stop practicing? It won't be long before you can't even string your own bow, let alone shoot the thing. Right? Just like today, if you quit going to the gym, you quit lifting, you lose the gains. Right? You have to keep working at it as an archer. By comparison, there is no bodybuilding necessary to become a musketeer. Your strength does not give the weapon its power. Chemistry gives it its power. The depth of the shooter's skill does not give the weapon its range and accuracy. This is going to have the same range and accuracy whether a human finger pulled its trigger or not. The skill for the musketeer, and there is definitely skill in becoming a musketeer, the skill for the musketeer is in learning how to efficiently put the chemistry and the physics to work, and it is much more readily learned. And they figured at that time, 2 weeks was sufficient to make a man proficient with a musket. And it hasn't changed much in 400 years. You go enlist in the infantry today, you're going to get months of training, and about 2 weeks of it are going to be spent focused on the use of the firearm. Now, after those 2 weeks, additional practice, you can absolutely get even better, but you will be serviceable after those first couple of weeks. There's going to be a big advantage for the colonists here because while they've brought military men who know what they're doing in a fight, they've also brought tradesmen and craftsmen and laborers to build the place and make money for the company. Now, all of them, in a matter of weeks, can be got up to speed to help defend the colony. That's going to be really useful to be able to use everybody you've got. And while you don't want to plan on taking losses, you do need to plan for the eventuality if you take losses. If Powhatan loses a warrior, he doesn't have anywhere he can go out and get another one. He has to wait for the man's replacement to grow up into the job. You lose a musketeer at Jamestown, you got ships showing up on average twice a year. They're bringing more stuff and more people. And a couple of weeks after those people get off that ship, they're ready to rock, right? So that ease of use is going to be a major, major advantage. You take a step back from Jamestown specifically and you look at overall Spanish, Portuguese, French, Dutch, Swedish, English, European colonization into the Americas in the 15 and 1600s. You see a lot of conflict, a lot of fighting between the colonial powers and the indigenous populations, and a lot of fighting between competing colonial powers. A lot of conflict. Very little of that fighting is actually being done by Europe's traditional warrior classes. That's important to bear in mind. At the same time Powhatan warriors are growing up learning how to fight, the gentry and nobility in Europe and England are growing up learning how to fight from the same age. And while some of them came here, the vast majority of the colonial populations are not gentry and nobility. And yet, they are functioning as effective armies of conquest. They're handling that conflict and they're coming out on top and they're rapidly expanding these colonial territories. And it's because, thanks to this technology, you're able to turn a grab bag of most everybody you've got into a reasonably effective combatant in a comparatively short amount of time. Now, it's important to note, throughout all of human history, there's always been stuff that's easy to learn how to fight with. Right? You've always been able to arm the masses. But the difference here traditionally the thing that you hand the peasant draftee and wish him luck is not the most effective weapon out there. Typically far from it. This is the first time that the thing that is the easiest to learn how to fight with is also the most devastatingly effective weapon available in its era. That is what makes it such a game changer. And ultimately starts getting you away from the need to even have warrior classes in the first place. Which is why today, you don't start learning how to be a soldier in kindergarten. You get to wait till you're already an adult before you have to start worrying about learning. Now as we talk ease of use, best way to illustrate that is to use it. So we're going to go ahead and go through the loading process here and show you how this thing works. First things first, I need to prime the pan. Means I need a little bit of gunpowder in this low iron trough at the rear of the weapon. So each time you reload, a little bit of powder put into the pan. Close the pan cover so the powder stays put and is protected throughout the rest of the process. And make sure there's no excess powder outside the pan that can cause it to go off before I want it to. Cast it about. Each one of these little wooden bottles called chargers are going to carry a charge. Just enough gunpowder to propel one bullet, measured out ahead of time so I don't have to stop and measure in the middle of a fight. Pop the top off and empty that powder right on down the barrel. Bullets themselves are going to be carried in the pouch down here in the hip. These weapons are not standardized. They will vary quite a bit. This one would fire about 1/12 of a pound of lead, which would put it in normal range for the time period, and by modern standards would put it at about 75 caliber or 19 millimeter, which as far as bullets go is a great big old bullet. And thanks to the length of the barrel, it's going to get that thing moving up around the speed of sound. Now you get that kind of mass moving at that kind of velocity, you've got a tremendous amount of kinetic energy, a lot of destructive potential. It's why these worked as well as they did, and it's why we're not going to be using a bullet in the middle of a modern museum demonstration. Today we're going to be using a paper ball in place of the lead one. Either case, the projectile is going to go directly on top of the powder charge. The scouring stick is then used to push it down the barrel, seat it tightly against the powder charge. Return the scouring stick and recover the weapon. At this point it's loaded and primed. Still not quite ready to fire though. It is important to remember why even to this day we use the word fire when we talk about firing firearms. You notice the theme there, right? Gunpowder doesn't magically go off when you pull the trigger. It has to be set on fire. It has to be ignited. Every firearm invented after the matchlock has some mechanism by which it makes its fire. This weapon does not. And so I've got to carry my fire around with me. In this case, in the form of a chemically treated length of burning rope called match, which we will now affix into the mechanism. Check to make sure it's going to land in the right spot. And now all it's left to do is to open the pan, exposing the powder, aim the weapon and squeeze the trigger, which is simply going to dip the burning rope into the gunpowder and set the whole thing off. I know it may have seemed a little counterintuitive. I've been talking about how easy this is to learn how to use, and then we went through all of that. So to summarize, what we've done is a little bit of gunpowder in the back, more gunpowder in the bullet down the front, and now we're going to shove burning rope in. Pretty straightforward. So what we're going to do here is fire this round, load and fire a second round without me talking about it. So you can see what that process is going to look like after you've had those couple of weeks of practice to get it down to muscle memory. It's time consuming. Don't believe me, I know, it's slow. Teamwork is key. You need to be out there with a big enough group of people to where you can take turns firing and protect each other as you're reloading. So don't think about being alone, getting shot at while you're doing this. Think about the fact that your friend has immediately stepped up in front of you and is shooting for you while you're doing all of this. So again, it does tend to be a little on the loud side. You may wish to cover your ears. Present your piece. Give iron. Hey, ready your pace. Present your pace. Give iron. All right, well, that concludes our demonstration of the matchlock musket. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out to see us today. If you have any questions about anything, I'll be happy to answer them for you. And if not, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. This is a reconstruction. They don't let us play with the originals. And of course, with good reason. But the big advantage for us with the reconstructions is that we can put them through a lot of abuse. Eventually wear them out and replace them. You can't replace an original once you've worn it out. Now the original that this one is copied.